They say the quiet ones are the ones you should watch. But in my family, the quiet ones were the ones who got forgotten. Until the day I realized that being overlooked had given me something my golden sister never had, the ability to see everything. My name is Catherine, and for 43 years, I was the shadow daughter. The one who helped without being asked, succeeded without being celebrated, and loved without being loved back in equal measure. This is the story of how I learned that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or property. It's the strength you discover when you finally stop waiting for someone else to value what you've always known you were worth. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in March, while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my corner office overlooking downtown Seattle. I'd built my consulting firm from nothing, brick by brick, client by client, but when I saw my father's name on the caller ID, I still felt that familiar flutter of hope. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today I would matter. Catherine. Dad's voice was tight, formal. I need you to come home. It's about your mother. Mom had been fighting cancer for 8 months. 8 months during which my sister Vanessa had been the appointed family coordinator, the one who organized the care schedule, made the medical decisions, and received the daily phone calls from Dad. I'd offered to help, of course. I'd driven the 3 hours from Seattle to our hometown of Bellingham every other weekend, bringing Mom's favorite lavender tea and sitting quietly by her bedside while she dozed. But somehow I was always the afterthought. How is she? I asked, already reaching for my car keys. Not good. Vanessa thinks. He paused, and I could hear the weight of words he couldn't bring himself to say. Just come home, Catherine. We need to talk. I arrived at the house where I'd grown up to find it transformed into a command center. Vanessa had taken over the dining room, her laptop surrounded by medical files, insurance papers, and what looked like legal documents. She glanced up when I walked in, her expression a mixture of stress and something else I couldn't quite identify. Finally, she said, not getting up. Dad's been waiting for you. Standing in that doorway, seeing my sister orchestrating our family crisis with the same confidence she'd always wielded, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. The feeling of being perpetually one step behind, always arriving to a story already in progress. If you've ever felt like the forgotten daughter, the one who shows up but never quite belongs, I want you to know you're not alone. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of women who are ready to rewrite their stories because your voice matters, even when your family doesn't always listen. Vanessa had always been the sun around which our family orbited. Beautiful, charming, spontaneous, everything I wasn't. While I'd been getting straight A's and helping Mom with the household accounts, Vanessa had been collecting boyfriends and adventures. While I'd been building a career, she'd been building a lifestyle funded by a series of wealthy relationships and, increasingly, by Mom and Dad's quiet financial support. I found Dad in the kitchen, staring out at the garden Mom had tended for 30 years. He looked older than his 68 years, worn down by months of watching the woman he'd loved for 45 years slowly slip away. The doctors say it's time, he said without turning around. Weeks, maybe days. I wanted to reach out, to put my hand on his shoulder, to offer comfort. But we'd never been that kind of family. Physical affection was rare, emotional conversations even rarer. We loved each other through actions, through showing up, through the assumption that caring was understood even when it wasn't expressed. What can I do? I asked. He turned then, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, uncertainty. Vanessa's been handling everything. She thinks we should move Mom to that hospice facility in Vancouver. It's supposed to be very nice. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You mean take her away from here? From her garden, her home? The care would be better. Professional. Vanessa says. What does Mom say? Dad's shoulders sagged. She's not really. She's not having many clear moments anymore. I spent the next hour sitting with Mom, holding her thin hand and watching her face for signs of the woman who had taught me to balance checkbooks and plant tomatoes, who had quietly encouraged my business dreams while celebrating Vanessa's spontaneous adventures with equal enthusiasm. She stirred once, her eyes focusing on mine with sudden clarity. Katie, she whispered, using the childhood nickname only she still used. My practical girl. You'll know what to do. Before I could ask what she meant, she was asleep again. That evening, while Dad dozed in his chair and Mom rested upstairs, Vanessa and I sat in the living room having the kind of conversation we'd been avoiding for months. I know what you're thinking, Vanessa said, her voice defensive. You think I'm being cold, wanting to move her. I think you're being practical, I replied carefully. You always are when it comes to other people's lives. She flinched. That's not fair, isn't it? You've been making all the decisions for months. Dad calls you first, asks your opinion, follows your lead. I just show up and sit quietly, like always. You could have spoken up. You could have been more involved. I tried. Remember when I suggested we hire a home health aide so Mom could stay here? You said it was too expensive. When I offered to pay for it, you said it wasn't about the money. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. This isn't about us, Catherine. It's about what's best for Mom. Is it? Or is it about what's easiest for you? The words hung between us like a challenge. I hadn't meant to be so direct, but months of being dismissed, of having my opinions politely ignored, had finally reached a breaking point. I've been here every day, Vanessa said, her voice rising. Every single day, managing her care, dealing with the doctors, making sure Dad eats something besides cereal for dinner. Where have you been? Working, earning money, living my life 3 hours away because that's where my business is, where my life is. I kept my voice level, but I felt the familiar ache of having to justify my existence. I come when I can. I contribute what I can. But somehow, that's never enough. I never said it wasn't enough. You didn't have to. We sat in silence after that, the weight of 43 years of unspoken grievances settling between us like dust. I wanted to say more, to finally articulate the feeling of being perpetually second best, but what was the point? Mom was dying, and this wasn't the time for old resentments. The next morning, I woke early and went to Mom's room. She was awake, looking out the window at her garden. Spring was coming late that year, but the daffodils she'd planted decades ago were beginning to push through the soil. They're early, she said without looking at me. The daffodils? The decisions. Everyone's so eager to make decisions. She turned to face me, and I was surprised by the clarity in her eyes. I'm not ready to leave my garden, Katie. I sat down on the edge of her bed. Then don't. Vanessa thinks. What do you think? Mom smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her in months. I think I raised one daughter who thinks with her heart and one who thinks with her head. And I think I'm going to need both before this is over. That afternoon, I called my assistant and told her to clear my schedule for the next month. I was staying in Bellingham. The decision created a ripple effect. Vanessa was clearly relieved to have someone else share the daily caregiving responsibilities, but she was also territorial about the arrangements she'd made. Dad seemed grateful but confused, uncertain how to navigate having both daughters present and occasionally disagreeing. The real revelation came when I started going through Mom's papers, ostensibly to help organize her affairs. What I found was a meticulous record of every financial transaction, every loan, every gift that had flowed from my parents to Vanessa over the years. Down payments on cars, credit card balances, rent payments, even a $15,000 loan for a failed art gallery venture that had never been repaid. I wasn't surprised by the amounts. I'd always known that Vanessa received more financial support than I did. What surprised me was the documentation. Mom had kept everything, every check stub, every promissory note, every email where Vanessa had promised to pay back loans that had somehow transformed into gifts. More interesting were the records of what I'd contributed over the years. Every time I'd sent money for home repairs, every Christmas and birthday check, every time I'd quietly paid for a family vacation or covered Dad's medical bills when his insurance fell short. Unlike Vanessa's transactions, mine had been consistent, predictable, and never requested back. I was still processing this discovery when Vanessa found me in Mom's study. "What are you doing?" she asked, seeing the papers spread across the desk. "Trying to understand Mom's filing system. She wants me to help with the estate planning." I thought I was handling that. "You are. We both are." I looked up at her. "Did you know she kept records of everything? Every financial transaction, every loan, every gift." Vanessa's face went pale. "She didn't need to do that. Family doesn't keep score, doesn't it?" I gestured to the neat columns of figures. "Because according to this, the score is pretty clear." For the first time in our adult lives, Vanessa looked uncertain. "Those loans. I was always planning to pay them back." "I know. But you didn't." "I couldn't. You know how things have been for me. The divorce, the gallery, I know. And I'm not judging you for it. I wasn't, surprisingly. But I think we need to talk about what happens next. What happened next was 3 weeks of the most honest conversations our family had ever had. Mom, during her clearer moments, began to share things she'd never told us. About her own childhood as the overlooked daughter, about the choices she'd made to ensure both of us knew we were loved, even if that love was expressed differently. I worried about you, Katie, she said one afternoon while I was helping her with lunch. You were so self-sufficient, so capable. I worried that you'd never need anyone, that you'd end up alone. And Vanessa? I worried that she'd never learn to take care of herself, that she'd always need someone else to solve her problems. Mom's laugh was weak but genuine. I suppose I enabled both of your extremes. Dad, too, began to open up in ways he never had before. He talked about his own father, a man who'd shown love through work and provision rather than words. He talked about his pride in my business success, how he'd boasted to his friends about my achievements even though he'd never said as much to me directly. I always knew you'd be fine, he said. You didn't need me to worry about you. But I needed you to be proud of me. I was. I am. He paused. I just didn't know how to show it. The most difficult conversation was with Vanessa. It happened late one night, both of us exhausted from a long day of managing Mom's care. We were sitting in the kitchen, sharing a bottle of wine and the kind of companionable silence that had become rare between us. I know you think I'm selfish, she said suddenly. I think you're scared. She looked surprised. Scared of what? Of not being special anymore. Of not being the one everyone worries about and takes care of. Vanessa was quiet for a long time. Maybe, but you're scared too. Of what? Of being special. Of being the one people rely on. Of mattering. It was my turn to be surprised. I've always mattered. Not the way you wanted to, not the way you deserve to. She met my eyes. I see how you look at me sometimes. Like you're trying to figure out what I have that you don't. What do you have that I don't? Permission to be imperfect. Permission to need help. Permission to fail and be loved anyway. She smiled sadly. But you know what you have that I don't? I shook my head. The ability to succeed without anyone's permission. The strength to be loved for who you are, not for what you need. Mom died on a Thursday morning in April, quietly, in her own bed, with her garden visible through the window. She'd been unconscious for 2 days, but that morning she opened her eyes, looked at each of us, and smiled before closing them for the last time. The funeral was small, attended by friends and neighbors who remembered Mom's quiet kindness, her steady presence in the community. Vanessa handled the arrangements with her usual flair for drama and beauty, while I managed the logistics and paperwork. We worked together smoothly, each playing to our strengths. It was only after the funeral, when the will was read, that the final piece of Mom's quiet wisdom revealed itself. She'd left the house to Dad, as expected. But she'd also established a trust fund, divided equally between Vanessa and me. The twist was in the terms. Vanessa's portion would be distributed monthly, providing her with a steady income for life but no access to the principal. My portion was given to me outright, but with a condition: I had to use it to support a cause or project that would benefit other women who had been overlooked or undervalued. There was also a letter, written in Mom's careful handwriting. To my daughters, I have loved you both exactly as you are and exactly as you need to be loved. Catherine, you have spent your life proving your worth. You don't need to prove it anymore. Vanessa, you have spent your life being precious. You don't need to be precious to be valuable. I hope you will learn from each other what I couldn't teach you separately, that strength and vulnerability, independence and connection, are not opposites, but partners. Take care of each other. You're all the family you have now. 6 months later, I sold my consulting firm and used the proceeds, along with Mom's inheritance, to establish a foundation that provides business mentorship and startup funding for women over 40 who are starting new careers or businesses after major life transitions. Vanessa, to everyone's surprise, became the foundation's community outreach coordinator, using her natural charisma and people skills to connect with women who needed support but didn't know how to ask for it. Dad moved into a smaller place close to both of us, and for the first time in our adult lives, we began to function as a family that chose to be together rather than one bound by obligation and unspoken resentments. The foundation's first client was a 52-year-old woman named Elena who wanted to start a catering business after her divorce. She reminded me of myself at that age, confident, determined, but carrying the weight of years of being underestimated. When she walked into our office for her first meeting, she apologized for taking up our time. "I'm probably not what you're looking for," she said. "I'm not special or anything." I looked at her across the desk, this woman who had raised 3 children, managed a household, and supported her husband's career for 25 years, who was now ready to build something of her own, and I smiled. "That's exactly what we're looking for," I said. That night, I called Vanessa to tell her about Elena. We talked for an hour, planning how to support her business launch, sharing ideas about marketing and community connections. It was the kind of conversation we'd never had before, collaborative, excited, focused on something bigger than our own old hurts. "You know what's funny?" Vanessa said as we were ending the call. "What?" "I always thought you had everything figured out. Your business, your independence, your ability to handle everything alone. And I always thought you had everything easy. The attention, the support, the freedom to make mistakes. We were both right. And we were both wrong." "Yeah, we were." After I hung up, I sat in my living room, the small, carefully chosen space I'd created for myself after selling the house I'd bought to prove I could, and thought about inheritance. Not the money or property kind, but the deeper kind. The patterns we inherit from our parents, the roles we inherit from our families, the stories we inherit about who we are and what we're worth. I'd inherited the role of the capable daughter, the one who didn't need help or attention. Vanessa had inherited the role of the fragile daughter, the one who needed protection and support. Both roles had served us and limited us in equal measure. But we'd also inherited something else from Mom, the ability to see each other clearly, to love each other despite our differences, and to choose a different story for ourselves and for the women who would come after us. The quiet daughter's inheritance, I realized, wasn't about being overlooked or undervalued. It was about developing the strength to see clearly, the wisdom to wait for the right moment, and the courage to use your voice when it mattered most. Today, the foundation has helped launch over 200 women-owned businesses. Each success story is a reminder that being overlooked can be a gift. It teaches you to see yourself clearly, to value your own worth, and to recognize that same worth in others who have been invisible for too long. Sometimes I think about that Tuesday morning when Dad called, when I was just another overlooked daughter waiting for her family to notice her worth. I think about the woman I was then, confident, successful, but still seeking validation from people who didn't know how to give it. That woman is still part of me, but she's no longer the whole story. The whole story includes the woman who learned to see her sister's fear beneath her selfishness, who learned to understand her parents' limited ability to express love, who learned that being overlooked had given her the greatest gift of all, the ability to truly see others. Family betrayal isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just the slow erosion of being taken for granted, of having your contributions minimized, of being loved conditionally while others are loved freely. But healing isn't always dramatic either. Sometimes it's just the quiet decision to stop waiting for others to validate your worth and start living as if you already know what you're worth. The quiet ones, it turns out, are the ones you should watch. Not because we're dangerous, but because we see everything. And sometimes, when we finally speak, we have something worth saying. What we learned in my family is that love isn't finite. There's enough for everyone, but it has to be given freely, without conditions, without scorekeeping. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the space to discover their own worth, even if it takes 43 years to get there. Every overlooked daughter has a choice, to stay in the shadows, resentful and waiting, or to step into the light she's been creating for herself all along. I chose the light. And in doing so, I discovered that the quiet daughter's inheritance isn't what others give you, it's what you give yourself. What resonates with you in Catherine's story? Have you ever felt overlooked in your own family? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story touched you, consider subscribing for more stories about finding your voice and claiming your worth. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen not with dramatic gestures, but with quiet, steady choices to value ourselves the way we've always deserved to be valued.